For the love of God, finding closeness with a God you cannot touch. How many of you would say it's a challenge to feel close to God? Raise your hand. So I think it's the most difficult relationship for a person to have is the relationship with God. God is not tangible. We don't see God. God doesn't speak to us directly, right? And so it's really a challenging relationship. And that's what we're talking about in tonight's lesson. Is there a possibility in having a solid relationship with God? And if there is, how do we have that relationship? How can we cultivate that relationship and make it happen? And I'm going to tell you up front that two things. One is that the most sophisticated of people pursue a relationship with God. How much effort does it take to say, I can't have a relationship with God because I don't see Him. God, if you want to have a relationship with me, show up. How hard is it to say that? Is it hard to say that? Easy, right? It requires nothing from yourself, right? Whenever you put the responsibility on another person, right? Our marriage is going to be good when you get your act together, right? Anyone can say that, right? Of course, which is probably why most people do say it, right? But a person who says, I'm going to take responsibility for the relationship, and I'm going to work at it, that produces something which is unique and special, because it requires an enormous amount of effort, especially when we're talking about a relationship with God. So that's what we want to see if we can somehow figure out a path to doing maybe more and better than we've been doing until now. Let's begin with a prayer from our Yom Kippur prayers. This is a prayer which speaks about our relationship with God and gives different metaphors to the relationship between us and God. We're going to start with text number 1 on page 178.
For we are your people, and you are our God. We are your children, and you are our Father.
I'm going to interject for just a moment, Matt, I'm sorry. While we're going through this reading, I want you to think about which metaphor resonates best with you. Okay? Go ahead.
We are your servants, and you are our master. We are your congregation, and you are our portion. We are your inheritance, and you are our lot. We are your flock, and you are our shepherd. We are your vineyard, and you are our watchman. We are your handiwork, and you are our creator. We are your beloved ones, and you are our beloved. We are your treasure, and you are our God. We are your people, and you are our king. We are your chosen ones, and you are our chosen one.
Okay, thank you. So, which of these metaphors best describe your relationship with God? Do you find any of the metaphors used to describe our relationship with God to be unusual, surprising, or even troubling? Which one troubles you? Any of them trouble you? I'll tell you something. I did something this Saturday night. I drove into Brooklyn and drove back. I had to take some of my kids there, and there was also a family gathering. So I was at the family gathering for like an hour. And one of my uncles is a big character who shall remain nameless for the moment. He's a fun character. He's a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed sitting with him. And he said that somehow the word Harachaman, which means the merciful one, came up. And he had a very strong reaction to the title Harachaman, the merciful one, that God is being referred to as the merciful one. This is a mature Hasidic man, okay, who's got grandchildren, and he was bothered, like he was disturbed by it, because he was saying, look at what I see going on in the world, and he was disturbed. So I think he would object to, at least he was objecting on Saturday night to that title. So that's what we're looking for over here. Is anything over here something that you object to? Why is there a need for so many different metaphors to describe the relationship? Why do you think there's a need for so many different metaphors? Excellent. Different moments, maybe God shows up in a different way. Very good. And in these different relationships, we will feel different emotions. Right? So when we talk about children and the Father, we may feel love. Right? My sense when I heard, we are your vineyard and you are our watchmen, we feel safe, protected. Some of them bring out reverence and awe. Some of them fear, maybe, of this awesome being. Trust, to adore God, all different types of emotions that different names are going to bring up. We're going to focus on Hasidic philosophy teaches us that there are two primary emotions out of which all other emotions flow. And actually psychologists have told me that in fact in psychology also they use the same model. And that is
love and fear.
Excellent. Love and fear. That's what they are. Fantastic. Love and fear. Everything stems out of love and fear. Everything is some form or another of either love or fear. And we need to understand what love and fear actually are. But we're going to focus primarily tonight on love. Okay? On having a loving relationship with God. Did you ever even say the words to someone, to a friend, you know, I love God? Do you remember yourself ever saying those words? Okay. We have about 2 hands up. Okay. It's not very Jewish. It should be very Jewish, but it's not very Jewish. You hear Christians say it all the time, but Jews are like, love God. I don't even know if I should love myself. Some Woody Allen in here, right? But like this notion of loving God is like a shocking notion to most Jews, right? So we want to focus a little bit on this idea of loving God, and we're going to see right now that in fact we are expected to aspire to be in a state of love with God, which may sound completely strange or unusual. Let's read text number 2 from Maimonides. Maimonides was a major intellectual and rationalist and a doctor, right? But yet he speaks so emotionally.
What is the proper degree of love that we ought to have for God? Our love for Him should be powerful and intense to the point that the entirety of our being is consumed with this love, such that it is constantly on our mind. Imagine a man who falls deeply in love with a woman to the point that he cannot remove her from his thoughts. He thinks of her when he sits, when he stands up, when he eats and drinks, etc. One's love for God ought to exceed this love. Thus we are commanded, you shall love your God with all your heart and with all your soul. King Solomon referred to this degree of love for God when he exclaimed, I am lovesick. Indeed, the entire Song of Songs is a parable that describes this intense love.
This is pretty strong. I would say actually very, very strong. It's telling us that just like a man falls deeply in love with a woman and can't get her off of his mind, that's how much we should feel love for God. That's pretty powerful. That means with everything you're doing, God's coming back into your head. You're in the middle of work and you're thinking about God. How many of you get distracted by God in the middle of your day? Like, God, okay, I love you, but leave me alone for a few minutes, right? That's not our big problem. And what's interesting is that King Solomon, who Maimonides refers to, he wrote a book, which Song of Songs, right? Which really, if you read the book of Song of Songs, it's a fantastic book of romance. And it's beautifully written, and you're going to see this in the next text. Beautifully written, like a real drama, the real drama of a romance. Why would King Solomon write a romantic book? The reason why he wrote it was because this book is really a metaphor of the relationship between the Jewish people and God. That's really what it is. And he's expressing in the language of a man and a woman, God and the Jewish people. Who's the man in the relationship? The man is God. And who's the woman? Men have a hard time hearing this, but women are the Jewish people. That's right, all of you men. So some of you who frequent the synagogue have heard this from me. I get special pleasure out of saying this. We all have a strong feminine aspect to us because in our relationship to God, we are the feminine side. Okay? So in the dialogue that King Solomon writes about, when he writes about a man and a woman, the man is God and the woman is the Jewish people. And we're going to read, now that you have that understanding, as we read through text number 3, pay attention to it through those lenses.
I was asleep, although my heart was awake, when I heard the sound of my beloved knocking on the door. Open for me, my sister, my beloved, my dove, my perfect one. Open quickly, for my head is drenched with dew, and my hair is soaked by the rains of the night. But I declined to get up to open the door. I responded, I have taken off my robe. Must I put it back on? I have washed my feet. Must I soil them again? My beloved extended his hand through a hole near the door. Upon seeing his hand, my feelings for him were aroused. I arose to open the door for my beloved. I sent it myself. My hands dripped with myrrh. Myrrh flowed from my fingers onto the handle of the door lock. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved turned and was gone. My soul nearly departed from me because of his harsh words with which he left me. I wandered the city streets and searched for him, but did not find him. I called for him, but he did not answer me. The watchmen who patrolled the city found me. They beat me and wounded me. The watchmen of the walls took my jewelry off me. O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, what will you tell him? Swear to me that you will tell him that I am lovesick.
This is very, very expressive. And it's speaking about the interaction that goes on between the Jewish people and God, where God comes knocking on our door. We're busy. We don't want to get our feet dirty to open up the door for God, which basically means we're not really that interested. And then suddenly we have a craving, and God is no longer there, and now we're seeking God. And this is sort of the back and forth that goes on between the Jewish people and God. And there are different points in Jewish history that you can apply this conversation perfectly to, which has repeated itself numerous times. So, but what we see from all of this is that there is an intent for there to be a strong emotional relationship that goes on, a dynamic that's going on between us and God. And we all struggle with even engaging in this emotional relationship. But clearly that is an aspiration for us as Jewish people to have. Let's take this even further. There's a fantastic book called Duties of the Heart, in English is the translation. It's called Chovat Halavovot, The Duties of the Heart. It was written by a Spanish rabbi. This book is held in very high regard and actually can be enormously life-enhancing once we want to take the presence of God very as seriously as it should be taken. And one of the points that he makes in this book is that the base of all religious observance is emotion. That to really engage in religious observance fully, by not just by doing, one needs to be emotionally connected to what they're doing. So there is the ritualistic observance. How many of you get very inspired by a physical ritual? Okay. And do you have feelings when you're inspired? Yes, right? Let me think of, see if I can come up with a quick example. Okay, we're going to leave it for now. If it comes to me, I'll let you know. And the Chovat Halavavot, the Duties of the Heart, tells us is that we need to develop deeper feelings for the rituals that we do, because the mitzvah is incomplete without the emotion. So think of it very simply as when someone gives you a birthday gift, but you can tell that they did it out of a sense of duty, of obligation. So basically it's a ritual. It's just an empty ritual, right? Versus someone who gives you a much smaller present, but they give it to you with their full heart. Right? Which one do you appreciate more? The one with the full heart you appreciate far more, because there is a relationship behind the gift. It's not just an act. There's a much deeper dynamic going on. And that is what he says is very important when we do a mitzvah, to have emotion. But in order to have emotion, we need to be feeling towards God who we're doing this ritual for. Otherwise it can be a flat ritual. Let's read text number 4.
Know that words are associated with the physical tongue, while thoughts are the domain of the feelings of the heart. The words of prayer are the body, and the thought its spirit. When one prays with the tongue, while the heart is preoccupied with something other than the prayer is like a body without a spirit, a husk without a heart.
Excellent. How many of you ever experienced someone reading Hebrew at such a speed that you're shocked because you can't even read English at that speed? Did you ever experience that? Right? There's something, I don't know what it is, I never analyzed it, but there's something about Hebrew reading where you can read it at the speed of lightning, unlike any other language, I think, that I know of anyway. And people are like just shocked. And sometimes you come into a synagogue, usually it's a traditional synagogue, and where they do a lot of reading in Hebrew, and people are reading, and you're reading in the English, and there's no way you can possibly keep up with them. And you're wondering, are they just reading, or are they paying attention to what they're saying, or what's going on here? Right? It's a good thing to wonder about. The reason why is because I think we developed this ability to just read, which is the ritual to read. And while we're dealing with a business deal that we're going to be dealing with in an hour, so we're figuring out all the mechanics of that. And it's amazing, by the way, because I'm an expert at this. I can actually read prayers, and I can handle major problems going on that I'll have to deal with later in the day while I'm reading these words, because I read them so many times. It's just a ritual. And of course, while I am technically praying, that's not exactly the way prayer was meant to be, to say the least, right? So that's the reason why the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, he writes in the Tanya that prayer without tefillah below kavana, which is prayer without intent, focus, right, is kiguf below neshama. It's like a body without a soul. Because the ritual is the body, it's a structure. But we all know what a body is without a soul, right? It's not a living person. So you have the ritual, granted, and that's important to do the ritual, to do what needs to be done. But when it's done without the spirit, it's literally like there's no life there. Right? Like you can walk into a service, or you can, imagine you go to a concert, someone's singing, and you just know the guy's not even into it. Right? It's a disaster. It's just a complete disaster. So we need to have the Spirit, and that's the idea over here. Let's read text number 5.
Love of God motivates us to fulfill the 248 commandments of the Torah. Also, without this love, our mitzvah observance is deficient. To truly fulfill the mitzvot, one must love God and truly desire to cleave to Him. Awe and the fear of God ensure that we not transgress the 365 prohibitions of the Torah, because one who fears to rebel against the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, will abstain from wrongdoing. A greater level of awe derives from a keen awareness of God's greatness. One with this awareness would be ashamed to defy God by doing what is evil in His eyes.
Okay. So with these two primary emotions, of which we're really focusing on one, is love and fear. Now, one of the things that Hasidic philosophy does outstandingly is gives us a core definition of what these words actually truly mean. Love is actually one of the most distorted words in the English language. People have a very hard time understanding what love actually is. One key word for love is attachment. That's what love actually means. Love means attachment. So the story about the guy who says his friend sees him eating salmon, and his friend asks him, "So you like salmon?" He says, "I love salmon." Whenever I come to the restaurant, I order salmon. And his friend told him, if you loved salmon, you would let it swim in the water. You love yourself, not salmon. That's just a classic example of how we distort that word, amongst others in English. So it's really we really need to understand when we talk about emotions, we have to understand what these emotions actually are. Love, the word love means when I want to attach myself to something or to someone. I want to be connected with them. That is a motion of love, which is an emotion expressing that motion towards something or someone. Fear is the exact opposite. It's restraint and stepping back, distancing instead of drawing close. That's what fear is. So a mature form of fear is awe. Awe is wow. When you say wow, you stand back in awe from whatever it is that you're wowing over. These are the two emotions of love and fear. And the reason why love is the source of the emotion that drives us to fulfill the 248 positive commandments. A positive commandment means a commandment where God commands us to do something. Love drives us towards things. So that is a motivator to get us to do. What motivates us to stay away from and not to do the things that God tells us not to do? That is fear, because fear is restraint, it's stepping away. Or fear is, again, a base form. You can say awe, respect. These are all different forms of fear. When you love someone, you hug them. When you respect someone, you give them space. These are these two emotions. We're talking about loving God. That means we want the desire to be attached to God. And we just read about the importance of having this emotion when we do things for God. So God says to do a particular mitzvah, to make the kiddush every Friday night on a cup of wine. That should be from the easier commandments in the Torah. I know some people here need vodka, but it's only wine. And when we do it, can we do that with emotion towards God? Not emotion towards I love wine, right? But emotion towards God. Why God commands me to do this, why this is important, and I feel for it instead of just doing it. That is a mitzvah which is not just a body, but it's a body with a soul. It's rich. And by the way, I would say that one of the greatest challenges we have probably that we've always had, to be honest, but one of the greatest challenges that we have in inspiring people, Jews, towards Judaism, is that people are inspired when they're moved, when they're touched. When we see someone do something sincerely, wholeheartedly, emotionally, it moves us. Even if we don't fully understand it, it's moving. It's always moving when we see someone who's in it, right? Fully in it, engaged in it. When someone isn't in it, we can tell other people how important it is, how great it is. We can give lectures from today until tomorrow. The other person is not as motivated. So it's really powerful when we are engaged in, imagine when we make the Seder, right? The Passover Seder, and we sit down, and this thing is like a burden, but we've been doing it for the last 50 years, so we're going to stop now, so we do it, right? And it's important, and our grandparents did it, and our parents did it, and we're trying to get our kids to do it. But our kids feel that we're pulling our feet to get this done, right? And that under our breath we're muttering, why this and why that? Did we really have to do the matzah and can't have any bread? Right, or whatever it is. All that resonates, right? And that passes on. When someone, and in the contrary, when we are emotionally excited about it, which is a big challenge. How do you get excited about such things? Good question. That's its own challenge to get excited about matzah. But if we get excited about it, that is something that's very moving to people around us as well. One of the biggest challenges in feeling an emotion towards God is that a lot of what we do is mechanical, right? We do it because we're supposed to do it, but we're not necessarily, we don't relate to it. It's just, this is not what I would choose to do on a Wednesday night, except that it's Passover this Wednesday night. So we don't relate to it, and therefore we have a very big struggle with it. And this is a pervasive challenge. If there's anyone in this room that doesn't have that challenge, please tutor me, okay? This is a widespread challenge that anyone we know has. Let's read text number 6, where we have an explanation, an expression of the challenge to feel a relationship with God.
The immensity of the introduction of monotheism, its occurrence in real time, are certain and reverberate still. What we must recapture to mind as nakedly as we can is the singularity, the brain hammering strangeness of the monotheistic idea. Historians of religion tell us that the emergence of the concept of the Mosaic God is a unique fact in human experience, that a genuinely comparable notion sprang up at no other place or time. The abruptness of the Mosaic revelation, the finality of the creed at Sinai tore up the human psyche by its most ancient roots. The break has never really knit. The demands made of the mind are like God's name, unspeakable. Brain and conscience are commanded to vest belief, obedience, love in an abstraction pure, none inaccessible to ordinary sense than in the highest mathematics. The God of the Torah not only prohibits the making of images to represent him, he does not allow imagining.
So he makes a very strong case for it being extremely difficult to have a relationship with God. What do we do about this? That's our question. God is intangible. God is even unknowable, as we discussed, to a very large extent, because God is infinite and we're finite. God's invisible, God's inaudible, and we're supposed to have a relationship. So let's first define what a relationship. What we mean. Let's define the word relationship. Okay, I'm just going to give 2 definitions. We can probably give many more. One definition of a relationship is you ever hear someone say, "I have a working relationship with so and so," right? How deep does that relationship sound? It doesn't sound emotionally deep. It may be an excellent relationship, but it's not an emotionally deep relationship, right? And then someone says that I feel I have a very strong connection to this person. We feel very connected. We're soul brothers, right? What does that sound like? That sounds like 2 people have a deep emotional relationship. So when we talk about relationships, as we're talking about a relationship with God, we need to understand what relationship we're talking about. We all understand the relationship of a working relationship. God, you asked me to do something. I did it. I have other things to do now, right? I did what I was supposed to. It was a ritual. That's what it was. What we're really challenged with is having an emotional relationship. Here's a description of a relationship. You may remember some of this because we had a similar reading in lesson number 2 that brings out how we can feel a relationship with God by the mere fact that he asked us to do something. Anyone remember that?
Yes, there was a
Okay.
analogy, right?
Excellent. Football analogy, right. And I actually, he's not here tonight, but Gary sent me a video after after lesson number 2, which I'll share with you in just a minute, which sort of brings out, it was a Coke commercial. And it sort of brings out, I don't know if anyone remembers it, I don't, but it brings out this point actually where you have, a big sports player and giving attention to a little kid. Some of you remember it now? Okay, you'll see it in a minute. Let's read let's read text number 7.
The word mitzvah is related to the Aramaic word tzavta, which means connection. One who performs a mitzvah connects with God, the issuer of the commandment. This is the meaning of the Mishnaic phrase, the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah. The reward of the mitzvah is the connection it generates with God, who issued the commandment. This can be understood by way of an analogy from the physical world. A simpleton has an inner sense of bittul, nullity, before wisdom and the greatness of a sage, to the extent that in comparison he senses himself to be an utter non-entity. Similarly, in the sage's estimation, the simpleton is hardly human. Not that the scholar dismisses or rejects the simpleton. God forbid, for that would be bad manners, but he simply sees no connection or relationship whatsoever. Now, when the sage instructs the simpleton to do something for him, that command brings the simpleton into being. In the simpleton's own self-perception, he is no longer a non-entity. He has assumed a status unto himself in that he is able to carry out an order of the sage, and it is him that the sage addressed and instructed. In the eyes of the sage, too, the simpleton now exists. He is someone to whom the sage can speak and instruct. What is more, the command actually unites the lofty, exalted sage with the simpleton. The analog is obvious. It is understood that in the above analogy, it makes no difference whether the instruction regards a great and lofty matter or a simple and trivial one.
Okay. So, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when someone who is very significant in your eyes, who you have no association with, you live in different worlds, so to speak, right? Different realms. This person is involved in whatever, and you have no association with that. And they ask you to do a menial task for them. What does that do to you? What does that do to you? It elevates you. It makes you feel significant. It makes you feel excited. What do you feel about that person suddenly? Even more than whatever you felt until now about that person. So that's what this analogy is. God is coming to us and asking us to do something. If we're aware of the greatness of God and realizing that God's saying, I have a mission for this world and I need you to do this, and we think about that for a few minutes, that can actually bring excitement to us that we are doing this thing.
Please, take him out.
Mr. Green? Mr. Green?
Yeah.
You need any help?
Mm-mm.
I just want you to know, I think you're the best ever.
Yeah, sure.
Want my Coke? It's okay, you can have it.
No.
Really, you can have it.
Okay.
Thanks, Mean Joe.
That's the video. But you can imagine how elevated a kid would feel if they really had that experience. And that's all when we're talking about things which are or maybe superficial values to some extent. But when you're talking about something that has real value, that can be, no pun intended, a real game changer. Take Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein has an office in Princeton University. And there's a guy mopping the floor in the hallway. Okay, the guy mopping the floor, a wonderful guy doing a very important thing. And Einstein is a wonderful guy doing a very important thing. They do things which are completely disassociated from each other. What Einstein thinks about every day is completely different than what this guy thinks about every day. They just live in two completely different worlds. And everyone reveres Einstein. And he comes out of his office and he sees the guy, and he says, oh, would you mind, whatever, I have, whatever it is, would you mind doing something for me? In that moment, this guy typically feels elevated because he was actually noticed by someone who's of great significance. Okay, this is not a perfect analogy. Okay, I'm not going to overanalyze it either to show you why it's not a perfect analogy, but it's just the general point that suddenly this person takes on some significance, even though they're in completely different realms. In a very similar way, when God, who is of absolute true significance, the source of everything, asks us to do something, so what's happening is, if we think about it, we have major significance. Because God, and this was going back to what I think was in lesson number 2, I stated that God needs us in order for his mission in this world to be fulfilled. He created this need. It's not an inherent need, but he created this need for us, and that makes us very significant. And that's the entire point. However, if we think about this a little bit deeper, the sage and the simpleton, which type of relationship is this? Really, at the end of the day, we are just getting a job done for God, which basically means I just need to do a ritual. So it's maybe exciting the first and second time I think about it, but after a while I just realize I'm just a pawn here who's doing things for God. And that's actually not very inspiring. That is a working relationship. God needs something done. He asks me to do it. I get the job done. Right? After your second or third day at work, that's not exciting anymore. Right? Third or fourth time, Einstein says hello to the guy. The guy's not so impressed anymore. He says, why can't you get a haircut? Right? So does God actually even care how we feel, or does he just need us to get the job done? Does it even make a difference whether we're excited about what we're doing or not? That's the question. And of course, the answer to the question is, what's the answer to the question? It's very, very significant. But here we're going to understand why, and this is also significant to understand why. And that is to understand that when we do something, we want every part of our being to be engaged in what we're doing. That is being real and authentic about what we do. When we are disconnected emotionally, and we are only connected physically with what we're doing, or even only connected mentally, but not emotionally with what we're doing, we are not giving our everything. And what God wants to see is that our relationship with him permeates every part of our being. Just like you want to see that from the people who love you, God wants to see that from the people who are working very hard to love him. That it's a fully engaged relationship. It's not a partially engaged relationship. It's not just from the head, but it's from the emotions as well. Let's read text number 8.
Awe and love are figuratively called wings. Tikkanei Zohar explains that those who study the Torah and perform mitzvah out of awe and love are called children. Otherwise, they are called fledglings that cannot fly. Just as the wings of a bird are not essential parts of the body, its life does not depend upon them, as we learned. If its wings were removed, it is kosher. The essential parts of the bird are its head and body, while the wings merely serve the head and the body, enabling the bird to fly. So too, by way of example, the Torah and mitzvah affect the essential unity with God, because of God's will that it is present in them. The awe and love with which they are performed lift the Torah study and mitzvah and allow the will of God to be revealed in them.
So there's this beautiful metaphor that the Tanya explains, where just like a bird has two wings, when we do a mitzvah, in order for that mitzvah to fly, to be elevated, it needs to have two wings. What are those two wings? Love and fear. Or love and awe, if you will. Love and awe. To have emotion in what we're doing. That takes a flat act, a flat ritual, and makes it soar high. That's true in a relationship between man and man. That's true in a relationship between man and God. And God wants to see that every aspect of us is engaged. There was a cute bumper sticker that said, "Tithe if you love God, anyone can honk their horn." Meaning, essentially, that when we are emotionally connected in a relationship, then we're ready to do things which are uncomfortable, right? Because we're driven and we're driven by the emotions that we have. When we're not, we look for the easiest way out. If you remember in lesson number 2, we discussed the reasons for mitzvot. And if you remember, we spoke about an extrinsic reason, like reward. Why do I go to work every day? Because I want to make money so I can support my family. How excited are you about your work? If that's the whole reason you're going to work, very unexcited about the work until it becomes dreadful. Right? That's because the reason why we're going to work is for an extrinsic purpose. It's not intrinsic to the work itself. Then we discussed 3 other reasons, really 4 other reasons, but we're going to talk actually 3 other reasons as to why we do mitzvahs, which are deeper reasons, which hopefully all of us will connect to. 3 other reasons why God gave us commandments. Okay? One is self-refinement. Because we can find in every single commandment that God gives us a way in which that commandment actually makes us a better person. Every single commandment. So one reason is self-refinement. That's why God gave us commandments, so that we as human beings will be more refined people. Second reason is connection with God. Every time God commands us to do something, He gives us the ability to connect. A person who's not willing to be vulnerable in a relationship is not in a relationship. If you never need anything from your spouse, then you are destroying your relationship. Because the relationships are built on both needing from each other. Neediness. So therefore God said, I'm going to make myself vulnerable and need you to do things for me. And that develops a strong connection between us and God. So a second purpose, a deeper purpose of a mitzvah is it gives us the ability to connect with God. And the third reason, the deepest reason, is divine abode in this world. That we are on an idealistic mission. The idealistic mission is to make sure that this world, which hides the presence of God, becomes aware of the reality of God. And every mitzvah we have is another form of us being able to say to the world, or to ourselves, that there is a presence of God. Okay? Now, let's look at these 3, and let's ask ourselves, if we do a mitzvah without emotion, are we going to be achieving these 3 purposes? Think about it. If we do a mitzvah out of a sense of obligation, that means we're just doing the ritual, but we could care less about the ritual. How deeply is that going to refine us? We're not even engaging with the mitzvah. We're just doing it out of a sense of duty. Is that really going to refine our character? Hardly. Right? If we look at a connection with God, God says, do something. I need you to do this for me. And we show up and we just say, God, you need me to do it? Okay, I'll do it the quickest and the easiest way I can get it done. Because it's a sense of duty. Are we connecting to God deeply that way? Hardly. Right? It's a very surface level connection. And divine abode in this world. If we are disconnected from what we're doing emotionally, are we really demonstrating to the world the awareness of God? We'd rather there wouldn't be a God the way we're doing it. We just have to do it out of a sense of duty. So the reason why emotion is so important is because emotion demonstrates where we're at, and we achieve all the different levels of purpose that a mitzvah offers to us in a real, deep, concrete way. If we do not have emotion, we are not fulfilling the purpose of the mitzvahs in a significant way. It's a very surface level, superficial way. Let's read text number 9.
Mitzvah were given to enable the refinement of humanity. The performance of mitzvah refines us and connects us with God. This connection should permeate all our faculties and extend to the depth of the soul. Now, if one performs a mitzvah simply to discharge their obligation without passion, only their faculties of action are engaged. Consequently, their connection to God will be limited to their action faculties. It is God's will, however, that the entirety of the person and all of the faculties should be connected. This is accomplished by involving all of one's faculties in the performance of mitzvah. Nevertheless, serving God with one's higher faculties, love and awe, is not an end unto itself. The purpose of love and awe is to infuse mitzvah performance with life and enthusiasm. The objective of creation is to make a divine abode specifically of the lower worlds, which can only be achieved through utilizing one's lowest faculty, action, and doing mitzvah. The goal is only fully achieved, however, when the mitzvah are performed with all of one's capacities and faculties.
Okay, so excellent. So let me clarify. What connects us to God? The act of a mitzvah. That is the connector. That's why mitzvah means connection. Emotion is vitally important because emotion gets the connection to be far more profound than it will be if we don't have emotion in what we're doing. God wants every part of our being to be connected with Him. God does not want robotic people doing what we are supposed to do and then checking out. God wants us to be fully engaged in the relationship. And that expresses a true awareness and appreciation for the presence of God. So that's the reason why emotion is vitally important, even though it's extremely challenging. And we need to understand how we're going to achieve this. How are we doing? Any questions? Any objections? We're good? Okay. So how do we develop emotion in our service of God? This is the million-dollar question. And I'm going to tell you that there is no easy answer. Okay? There is no easy answer. Sorry. How to develop an emotive bond with God. There's a cute saying that everything boils down to mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Have you heard that one? But the answer to, and this of course is true for emotions for anything in life. Mind over matter is the way we get to choose what we feel towards. The reason why most of what we feel is natural is because we let our emotions lead us in life. Never happened to you? Why why we feel excited about this and not excited about that is primarily instinctive. That's what I feel, that's what I like. A mature, developed person actually leads his emotions with his mind. This is actually a fundamental in Chabad philosophy. It's called moach, which means mind, shalit, rules, al halev, on the heart. All of our emotions, ideally, right, which would make us almost superhuman, but ideally all of our emotions should be directed, should be focused. That means that of course, in the ideal world, in the perfect world, there's nothing I can say to you that will put you into an emotional state unless you process what I say with your mind and you decide that you should feel a certain way. That would be pretty cool, huh? What do you think about that? That would be nice to live a life like that. We have a lot of emotion which is unhealthy and distracting in life. And imagine if we would be able to limit that. Let's just say limit that, okay? Not get rid of all of it, but limit it, because we won't get rid of all of it. I can guarantee you that. 100% money-back guarantee. You will never get rid of all of your emotions, negative emotions, but we can limit it. And the way we limit it is only through the mind. But that is excruciatingly difficult. I think one of the most difficult efforts of a human being is a mental effort. Even harder than physical work. Mental effort to be able to insist that I'm going to think something through. To work in thinking through something so I have a real understanding of what's going on. And I understand what is real here, what is reality, versus, what I want to think the reality is. And then we respond emotionally very differently. Just to give you a very simple example. Okay, very simple example. 95% of the time, if not 100%, 95% of the time when someone yells at you, right, or is upset at you, or whatever, right, that gets you all disturbed, 95% of the time, their whole yelling and everything is all about, is almost entirely about them and not about you. But we get all worked up, right? That's what happens. So imagine if we were able to have a clear mind, which would be an unbelievable feat, right? But imagine if we were able to have a clear mind and not only realize that this is all about them, not about me, so that I don't get worked up. But even more so, I can actually feel bad for them that they have this whole issue. And actually, while they're yelling at me, show them compassion. That's what an ideal, that would be the ideal response to someone, which is, I mean, how many times do we do that? If you do that a lot, I'm really impressed, right? So that is the whole idea of mind over heart, okay? That's the idea of mind over heart. To be able to live, that is what I like to call healthy living. So it's all in the mind. In the Hebrew, we have different words for knowledge. One of the words is da'as, or da'at, depending on the accent. And da'at means knowing something so deeply that you become an embodiment of what you know. Okay? How many of you know that fire burns? Right? How many of you go through a deep thought process when you're near a fire, right? Or a fire is coming near you that you need to move away? Do you sit and contemplate and then make a decision? I hope not, right? It's instinctive, right? Because you embody the awareness, the knowledge that fire hurts me. And when you're an embodiment of that, you react naturally to it. That is what we call knowing, okay? Knowing something. Meaning that you have become an embodiment of it, and therefore you behave based on what you know. Do you know how many things you and I know that we don't behave on? We know it as an idea, but who cares that the ice cream is fattening? Right? I know it's fattening, but who cares? Right? Because what I just want to eat it. So that is knowledge that we don't actually know. Do you understand? We have not embodied the fact that this thing is not good for me. We only know it intellectually, but that intellect has not become a part of our emotions, so that we have an emotional reaction to that piece of knowledge. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah? Right? Okay. King David, right before his son, before he died on his deathbed, this is what he tells his son Solomon. Let's read text number 10.
And you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and worship him with a whole heart and with an eager soul.
Okay. So what does he say? Know the God of your father and worship him. The only way we can actually feel towards God is if we actually begin to know God. Okay? There is actually no other way. The process is think, and then you can choose how you feel. If you want to change the way you feel about something, if you want to love, how is it, okay, this is my sarcasm, but how is it that people pay $10, right, for a 12-ounce cup of this horrific tasting green juice? Tell me. Who is marketing this, right? They must be marketing geniuses. I mean, how in the world do they do that? Right? But here's how they do it. And I think there's a lot of truth to what I'm saying, by the way. Right? The way they do it is they have convinced literally people envision, when they see that cup, they envision themselves drinking down vitamins that are going to prolong their life. And this cup is going to prolong my life. And I don't want to take that away from anyone that is convinced about that. Maybe it's true. What do I know? I'm not a scientist, right? So if it's true, well, I hope everyone lives a long lives regardless, right? But that's literally what happens is in our minds, we have told ourselves a story about this glass of horrifically tasting green juice. I've drunk many cups of green juice. So I'm just being sarcastic here. But that's what we're doing. We are actually thinking about something. We are reshaping the meaning of what this is. And because we understand it differently, we have an entirely different experience with it. Right? What happens? Why will people pay $1,000 more for a brand name suit? Maybe $5,000 more for a brand name suit. It's the meaning that they let their minds tell themselves. Now, I'm not saying that they should or shouldn't. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just stating a fact, right? That our minds are telling us that this suit is a better suit. And let's just assume for argument's sake that it isn't. Let's just for argument's sake that it isn't, right? So what we're doing is our mind makes us feel differently. What happens when you put something on and you feel that you don't look so good in it? And 3 friends tell you, you look stunning, unbelievable. What happens? That dress, that suit becomes your favorite. Until the next person tells you, what are you wearing? Right? And it's all what our mind is telling us, and our mind controls our emotions. That's literally what's going on. So this is like, I mean, it's basic stuff, right? I'm not telling you anything brilliant, but I'm just bringing awareness to it to say that this is true with God as well. It's the way we perceive God and the way we understand God that is going to determine how we feel about God. So there is actually a word in a Hebrew word called hidbonenut, right? Hidbonenut. Anyone ever hear that word? Chaim, you heard such a word? How do you translate that in English, you know? So we'll translate it simply as meditation, okay? As meditating. But meditating is like now it became a real fancy, trendy thing. Anything that becomes trendy already, the trendiness of something starts corrupting it. So it's not about sitting cross-legged or, you know, or getting a specific type of an app or whatever it is. Even though I have a fantasy of creating a meditation app one day, a Jewish meditation app one day. It's a nice theory. It's been sitting in the back of my head, right, in my free time. But it's about focusing our mind on an idea. That's what meditation is, okay? It's that simple. It's not the meditation of clearing your mind, which is not a Jewish concept. It's not the way we meditate. We meditate by focusing our mind on a certain idea. That means you just, however you do it, it can be through studying, it could be through prayer, you can have words guiding you, but you keep your mind focused on something. When you keep your mind focused on a certain thing, you connect with that idea in a much deeper way. When you connect with that idea in a deeper way, you develop feelings towards that thing. Give you a very simple example. Never ever do this, okay? Highly advise you should never ever do this. But if you do, this is what's going to happen, okay? Yeah, don't try this at home. Only under supervision. You left home in the morning furious, or maybe just upset at your spouse, or at one of your kids, or at your father or mother or somebody, whoever it is, okay? And you're sitting at your desk and you're all worked up, right? You have all of these negative emotions. So you close your eyes for a minute, or you don't have to close your eyes, right? You just think for a minute. And you think about 3 things, just 3 things, that you really appreciate about your spouse or your child or whoever that wretch who ruined your morning, the 3 things you appreciate about that person. What happens? What happens is your negative emotions fly right out of you. That's what happens. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. Sometimes you're so miserable and you're enjoying your misery so much that you refuse to do that. Okay? I understand that. Been there, done that. Right? I'll be there again and do it again. Right? But the way to change the way we're feeling is very simple. It's not very complicated. You don't need to go to therapy for 20 years to learn how to do this. All you need to do is think about things that you appreciate about that person. And those thoughts change the emotions. That's what hisbonenut is. Now imagine doing that about God. Okay? God may be, we'll get to this in a second. Now, the other interesting thing is that every single person has a different relationship with God. No 2 people have the same emotional relationship with God. The reason why is we think differently. We appreciate different things. And so therefore our response to our thoughts are different. And this is actually expressed also from a verse written by King Solomon in Proverbs. It's an understanding, a deeper understanding of the words. This is part of the Eshet Chayil prayer that we sing every Friday night to the women, the specialty of the Jewish woman. And one of the words is Noda Basha'arim Baila. If you look at text number 11, her husband is known at the gates. That's what the words literally mean. But the husband in this verse, who's husband in the relationship between Jews and God? Who's the husband? God. The husband in this verse refers to God, who makes himself known and connects with every individual in accordance with what that person's heart can contain. Mishaer, which is the same word as sha'arim, as gates. Each person to the extent they can cleave to the spirit of wisdom. Some people can meditate very deeply. Some people are very gifted. They have very strong mental ability. Some people are extremely weak. They've been raised on iPads, right? Where the movement in the game has to change every 3 seconds. So that will change the ability of a person to think about God. And we also think very differently. We also appreciate different styles of thought. Some people are literalists. Some people are spiritualists, right? Some people like esoteric, abstract. Everyone likes different things. And that will form what we think about, and that will form the way we feel about God. This is the only way we can develop an emotional relationship with God, by thinking about God. Now let me ask you this question. We're going to actually do we're not going to do an actual meditation, but we're going to walk through the steps of a meditation, if that's okay. All right? Before we do, let's read text number 12. Okay, let's read text number 12. It's a long one.
One way to arrive at a love for God is to take the heart diverse. As water reflects a face, so does the heart of a man reflect another heart. This means that just as water reflects the very image and features that a person presents before it, so too a heart that is loyal in its love for another awakens a corresponding loving response, cementing the mutual love and loyalty. This is especially true when love is observable. This is a universal law of human nature that applies even if the two people involved are equal. How much more so this law applies if a great and mighty king shows immense love for a commoner who is scorned, loudly, covered in filth, and lying in a dunghill. Imagine the king leaving his royal palace and accompanied by his entire retinue of ministers approaching the commoner. The king extracts him from the dunghill and brings him into the innermost chamber of his royal palace, a room where no servant or minister is permitted entry. There, the king embraces and kisses him and shares with him the closest of friendship, a spiritual attachment of the heart and soul. How great will be the love of this common, lowly individual for the king. He will most certainly be attached to the king with heart and soul, with infinite heartfelt sincerity. Even if his heart is made of stone, it will surely melt and become water, and it will pour with soulful longing for the love of king. Now, God has done with us all of this precisely, exactly as described, but it is infinitely greater because his greatness defies comprehension, and he pervades all worlds and transcends all worlds. God disregarded the higher and lower worlds and their inhabitants and chose none else but Israel, his nation. He brought them out of Egypt, the most decadent place on earth, a place of spiritual filth and impurity. He did not send an angel to take them out. Rather, he alone in his majesty and glory descended there, as God said, "I have come down to rescue them," etc. He took them out to bring them near to him with true closeness and unity, to share with them a soul connection.
Okay, we're going to stop right there, okay? Thank you very much, Irene. This is probably, how many of you found this reading to be, if you were following it, did you find it challenging? Raise your hand if you found it a little bit challenging. Okay. The reason why this reading is challenging is because of where our relationship with God is. So it's challenging. But I want to put it in maybe possibly more human terms just so we can somehow relate to it. Have you ever felt underappreciated? Yes? Do you currently feel underappreciated by someone in your life? Anyone? Do you feel underappreciated? Is there anyone in life that's just not appreciating you fully, the way they should? Okay. Okay, do you know who the person is? Don't tell me who the person is, but you know who the person is, right? Right? You know who the person is? Okay, so you're thinking of someone now who doesn't appreciate. It could be a child, right, who just doesn't begin to realize how much a parent does for them. Could be a spouse, right, who's always complaining you're not the spouse that they wanted or that you should be or whatever it is, right? Do you know what it is that they underappreciate? What is it that they underappreciate? Okay, let's just assume that you have something that they underappreciate, right? How can they think differently and change the way they feel about you? Now, I just want to tell you, this exercise is completely futile. I'm sorry. You know why? Because you're never going to get them to think that. That's why. Because you can't think for them. But now that you realize, hopefully, that if someone else were to think differently about you, they would feel differently about you. Now you can flip that and realize that you can do the same for the people that you don't appreciate. The moment we think differently about, right? So if you ever notice this, to me, this is clear as day. You know how relationships go, they're like roller coasters, right? Hopefully the highs and lows get, more flat as time goes on. So there isn't the drama. When I say highs and lows, I mean all the drama of flying high and flying and crashing, right? When we are not feeling connected, it's because we're focusing on all of the negative things. When we are feeling connected, we're focusing on the positive things. Did you ever you ever get into a conflict and then you make up? Tell me the truth. What changed after you made up? What changed? You're both the exact same people with all the same shtick and nuances and that disturb each other. What changed is the way you're thinking about each other. That is what changed. Which changes the way you feel about each other. And suddenly it's fantastic. It's like you people are crazy. You were fighting, and now everything's fantastic. Right? The difference is the way we think. So now let's just think on a simple level. I'm not talking about a philosophy class about God, which is very, very helpful. And if you want to learn that, all you have to do is study one book. It's called the Tanya. Okay? Women, we have a class Monday mornings. Men, we're figuring that out. But actually, we do an annual study of the Tanya that begins this coming Tuesday night. Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, a week from this Wednesday, we do an annual study of Tanya, and it begins on Wednesday night. And there are a bunch of people here who have done it in past years. But it's best to do this with a teacher, which you can also have online, and to study God. But even before we get into studying God, right? So we're really understanding how God interacts with us and how relevant God is to our lives, right? If we just think about this, we have all of our complaints to God. We may, okay? A lot of people do, right? We have a lot of complaints to God, right? We have a whole list of them. Do you ever make a counter list of all of the things that God does for us, right? So I've repeated this many times. Do you know how many days you woke up? How many days did you wake up? How many breaths did you take in your life? Right? How many breaths did you take in your life? How many days did you have food to eat? How many days? Right? If we just look at the endless number of things that we overlook, and we just say thank you to God for those things, okay? Assuming we can appreciate that God deserves a thank you for those things, okay? What happens when we do that is we have a completely different feeling towards God. And then when we know God wants us to do certain things, we have a completely different feeling about doing those things. It's all in our ability, it's all in our minds to choose whether we're going to have a miserable relationship or a powerful relationship. And the reality is the powerful relationship is founded, it's rooted in reality. The miserable relationship is very often not rooted in reality. I'm not going to say that we don't have anything to complain about. But what we have to thank God for is enormous. And this is usually true with almost any relationship that we have. We overlook the good very often, and we focus on the negativity. Our minds are predisposed to do that for some reason. And we have to fight our minds to look at the positivity and not to look at the negativity. So all we have to do is in the morning, every single morning, how do we wake up every morning? How does a Jew wake up every morning? We say a passage. We should all introduce this into our daily ritual if we don't yet. It's just one sentence. Moda'ani lefanecha, I am grateful to you. I'm thankful to you. Melech Chai v'Kayim, the everlasting God. Shehechazarta bi nishmasi, that you returned my soul to me. Bechemla, with compassion. Rabba emunasecha, great is your faithfulness. God asks us to have faith in Him, right? Do you know how much faith God has in you? God is so faithful to you that He gives you another morning, right? For 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, whatever the number is, it's a significant number, right? That's faithful. Faithful means that the person is always there to give that. That's what faithful is. God has faith in us. It's like God is rooting for us and saying, I'm giving you another day. I'm not sure how committed we are to God, right? But God sure is there for us every single day. That's unbelievable. We think about that for just a moment, it changes our feeling towards God. The power to have an emotional relationship with God sits right here. But we have to choose to go through the exercise, the time and value that I have to take a few moments of my day to think about God and not to be so consumed about myself. And think about this. So consumed with my own life and all of the things that I need to do that we don't even think for one moment about God, who gives us our life. Isn't that astounding? And God still gives us. That's how much God loves us. That's the point He's trying to say here. You want to know how much God loves you? Look how much He loves you. Right? Imagine you're married to someone, they never ever think about you. Everything is about them. They're a complete narcissist. Right? Everything is about them, and you just remain devoted to them. I don't think it's humanly possible. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do that. That's what God does with us. Huh? It's possible. It's excruciatingly possible. Yeah. So, so just to wrap it up, there's anyone ever hear of Jefferson's Bible? No one ever heard of the Jefferson Bible? Jefferson Bible is Thomas Jefferson once, is it who? Did I get that right? Yeah. So he once took a Bible and he cut out all of the biblical, all of the stories that relate to God. And he kept in only all of the relatable human aspects of the Bible, which is referred to as the Jefferson Bible. It's the Bible without a God, right? Some people wish they had a Bible without a God. But that is just avoiding talking about the big elephant in the room. In much of Judaism, the big elephant in the room is not spoken about. You know what the elephant is? No insult to God, but it's God. That's the big elephant. So we do all of the things, and we're involved, and we have social communities, and it's all great, but God is somehow left out of a lot of that. And we don't actually have a real conversation about God and having a relationship with God. That's what this class is about. That's what this course is about. And we all have the ability to enhance our relationship with God. We just have to be willing. Thank you, everyone, for joining the course.